She raised her hand and brought it down across my face, right there in my own living room, in front of every single person I had ever loved. The room went silent. I could feel the sting spreading across my cheek. I could feel every eye in that room on me. And I made a promise to myself in that moment, standing there in my own home at 90 years old, that I would not let this go. Not this time. Not ever again. Hi, my name is Rose, and I am 90 years old. Yes, you heard that right. 90 years old, and I am still here, still standing, still fighting, and still telling my story. I live in a little house in Charleston, South Carolina, the same house I have lived in for over 50 years. I bought this house with my late husband back when we were young and full of dreams, and I have held on to it through everything life has thrown at me, through grief and loss and hardship, and now, through this. My house is modest, but it is mine. It has a front porch where I used to sit every evening and watch the fireflies come out in the summer, and a small garden out back where I grew tomatoes and roses and whatever else the good Lord allowed to come up from the ground. That house is not just wood and brick and plaster. It is my life. It is my history. It is the place where I raised my children, where I buried memories of my husband, where I kept every photograph, and every letter and every piece of myself that still existed in this world. Before I retired, I worked for 32 years as a nurse. I worked in a hospital right here in Charleston, and I gave everything I had to that job. I worked nights, I worked holidays, I missed birthdays and school plays and family dinners, all because I believed in what I was doing. I believed that taking care of people mattered. I retired when I was 68 years old, not because I wanted to stop working, but because my body finally told me it was time. My knees were not what they used to be. My back had opinions it had never had before. And so I hung up my uniform and I settled into this house. And I thought, well, this is it now. The quiet years. The peaceful years. I thought wrong. I have one son. He is the light of my life, the thing I am most proud of in this world. I raised him alone after his father passed when he was just 12 years old. I worked double shifts so he could go to college. I packed his lunches and ironed his shirts and stayed up late helping him with homework even when I had been on my feet for 12 hours straight. He grew up to be a good man, a kind man, a man who called his mother every Sunday and brought her flowers on her birthday and helped her with her taxes every April. I thought I had done something right with him. I still believe I did. But good men sometimes make choices that even their mothers cannot quite understand. And the choice my son made when he was 43 years old was the choice that brought all of this to my door. He married her. I am not going to pretend. I had bad feelings about her from the very beginning, because that would not be the whole truth. When my son first brought her home, she was charming. She was well-dressed and well-spoken, and she laughed at the right moments and complimented my cooking and looked my son in the eyes when she talked to him. I thought, all right, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the woman who will make him happy. She was younger than him, about 15 years younger, and she had a way about her that was polished and confident, almost like she had rehearsed every sentence before she said it. I noticed that. But I told myself I was being too critical. Old women can be too critical sometimes, especially about the women their sons bring home. I knew that. I tried to check myself. I got married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends, and I stood there and watched my son look at her, like she was the whole world. And I smiled, and I held my flowers, and I said my prayers, and I hoped for the best. The first year was fine. They lived about 20 minutes from me, in a newer house in a nicer neighborhood than mine. She had a good job, something in finance, and my son was doing well too, working in engineering. They were a successful couple. They traveled. They went to nice restaurants. They bought nice things. And for the most part, they included me. My son made sure of that. He drove over every Sunday, and sometimes she came with him, and sometimes she did not. I did not read too much into that. People are busy. Life is complicated. I told myself everything was fine. But things started to shift in the second year. Small things at first. The way she would answer for my son when I asked him a question directly. The way she would redirect conversations when they started to go anywhere near the past, near his childhood, near the memories that belonged to him and me and nobody else. The way she would glance at her phone when I was telling a story, not rudely, not obviously, but just enough that I noticed. The way she started referring to my house as, and I remember this so clearly, that old place. Not mean exactly, just diminishing. Just enough to make you feel like something that used to matter had stopped mattering. Then came the comments about money. It started casually enough. They would come over for dinner and she would say something like, "Have you thought about downsizing?" Or, a lot of people your age are moving into communities where they can be around people their own age. At first I thought she was genuinely concerned. I thought maybe she was trying to be helpful in her own way. But then it kept coming. It came at Thanksgiving. It came at Christmas. It came on random Tuesday evenings when they stopped by unannounced. She would bring it up in different ways, sometimes framed as practicality, sometimes framed as concern, sometimes framed as a question, but it was always the same message underneath. You should sell this house. You should take that money and move somewhere smaller and simpler. You should stop holding on. I started to understand what was underneath all of that when she made a comment one evening that she did not realize I had heard. She was in the kitchen with my son while I was in the hallway, and she said, "The value of this property alone is worth more than everything else combined. You know that, right?" And my son said something I could not hear, and she said, "I am just being practical. Someone has to be." I stood in that hallway and I felt something inside me go very still, because I understood in that moment that this was not about my well-being. This was never about my well-being. This was about my house. This was about what would come to them when I was gone. And she was not willing to wait and see. She wanted things arranged, accounted for, secured. She wanted to know that when the time came, there would be no complications. I said nothing that night. I went back into the living room and I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and I smiled and I talked about the garden, and inside I was rearranging everything I thought I knew. Over the next several months, she escalated. She started asking me about my will. Not directly at first, but in that circling way she had, asking if I had a lawyer, asking if I had thought about what happened to everything when, and then she would trail off, and I would let her trail off, and we would both pretend she had not just asked what she had asked. She asked my son to talk to me about it, and he did, gently, uncomfortably, clearly not entirely sure why this had become a priority in his household. I told him everything was taken care of and not to worry. He seemed relieved. She seemed unsatisfied. Then she started coming by when my son was not with her. She would show up at my door with some excuse. She needed to drop something off. She was in the neighborhood. She just wanted to check in. And we would sit and have tea, and she would talk, and underneath all the talking she was always pressing. She would bring pamphlets for retirement communities. She would mention friends whose parents had moved and how much happier they were. She would talk about the burden of maintaining a property, about the risk of being alone, about how quickly things could go wrong for someone my age living by themselves. I want you to understand something. I have been alone for a long time. I raised a child alone. I buried a husband alone. I worked 32 years alone. I am not afraid of being alone, and I am not confused about my circumstances. I know exactly who I am and where I am, and what I am capable of. And I knew exactly what she was doing. But I still did not say anything. Not yet. Because I did not want to put my son in the middle. I did not want to be the difficult mother-in-law, the suspicious one, the one who caused problems. I had watched other families tear themselves apart over exactly this kind of thing, and I did not want that for my son. So I kept quiet, and I kept watching, and I kept my house, and I kept my peace, for as long as I could. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon in October. I had people over. Just a small gathering, nothing formal. A few friends from my old church, a neighbor I had known for 30 years, my son's cousin who was visiting from out of town. Maybe 10 people altogether. I had cooked, because I still cook, and I had set out my good dishes, the ones that had belonged to my mother, and I had put flowers on the table from my garden, and it was a beautiful afternoon, one of those October days in South Carolina where the air is just starting to cool down and everything looks golden. She showed up with my son. I had not expected them, but I was not unhappy to see them. Or at least I was not unhappy to see him. I brought them in, introduced them to the people they did not know, and we all sat together. It was pleasant enough for the first hour. Then she started. I do not even remember exactly how it began. Some comment about the house, about how much work it must be to maintain, about whether I had thought about the future. But it was in front of everyone, and it was more pointed than it had ever been before, and I could feel the discomfort in the room. People looking at their plates, looking at their tea glasses, not quite sure where to look. And something in me started to firm up. Something that had been patient for a long time started to stop being patient. I said quietly that I was happy where I was, and that I did not need to discuss it right now. I said it calmly. I said it with a smile on my face. I was not rude. I was not unkind. I just drew a line. She did not like that. She said something about how I needed to stop being so stubborn, that she was trying to help me, that this was for my own good. Her voice got a little louder than it needed to be. I could feel my son shift in his chair. I could feel my guests go very still. I said again that this was not the time or the place. And then she stood up, and she leaned across the table, and she slapped me across the face. There was a sound, not just the sound of the slap, though that was there too, that sharp crack of skin against skin, but the sound of the room itself, like everything in it exhaled at once. Cups being set down, someone's breath catching, the particular silence of people witnessing something that cannot be taken back. I sat very still. My cheek was burning. I could feel my heart going fast. And I looked at her, standing there, and I saw something pass across her face, something that might have been shock at what she had just done, but it passed quickly. And what replaced it was something harder, something that looked almost like she was calculating what came next. My son was on his feet saying her name. My neighbor had a hand over her mouth. My friend from church said, "Lord have mercy," softly, like a prayer. I stood up. I was steady. I did not cry. Not then. I said, "I want everyone to excuse us." And I walked to the front door and I opened it. And I looked at her and I said, "You need to leave my house." She tried to say something. My son took her by the arm, still saying her name. They left. My guests started talking quietly, looking at me with those looks people give you when they do not know what to say. But they want you to know they saw it. I poured myself another glass of sweet tea, and I sat back down and I said, "I am so sorry about that," and we finished the afternoon. But I did not forget. And I did not forgive. Not yet. Not until there was justice. That night, sitting alone in my kitchen after everyone had gone home, I made some decisions. The first decision was that I was going to document everything. Every visit, every comment, every piece of this pattern that I had been witnessing for over 2 years. The second decision was that I was going to talk to a lawyer, not because I was certain I had a legal case, but because I needed to understand what my rights were, what my options were, what could actually be done. The third decision was that I was not going to pretend this had not happened, not to protect her, not to keep the peace, not for anyone. I was 90 years old and I had worked too hard and lived too long and survived too much to allow myself to be struck in my own home and then act like it had not occurred. I called a lawyer the next morning. A woman who had been recommended to me by a friend, someone who specialized in elder law and family matters. I went in to see her that week, and I sat across from her desk and I told her everything. I told her about the comments about the house, the pressure about the will, the visits designed to wear me down, and then I told her about the slap. She listened to all of it without interrupting me. When I was done, she sat for a moment and then she said, "Do you have witnesses?" I said, "I have 9 of them." She told me that what had occurred constituted assault and battery under the laws of South Carolina, regardless of who had done it, and regardless of what had preceded it. She told me that there were also potential civil claims related to the pattern of behavior, particularly given my age and the nature of what she had been doing, the consistent attempts to pressure me regarding my property and estate. She told me that I had a case if I wanted to pursue it. I said I wanted to pursue it. Now, I want to tell you something about what it is like to decide to take legal action against your son's wife. It is not simple. It is not comfortable. It did not make me feel powerful or victorious or righteous, not right away. What it made me feel, at least at first, was tired, because I knew what it was going to cost. Not just money, though there was that too, but the cost to my relationship with my son, the cost to whatever peace we had built, the cost to everything that Sunday afternoons had meant for the past 20 years. I lay awake more than one night asking myself if I was doing the right thing. I asked God about it. I asked my late husband about it, in the way that you do when someone is gone, but you still talk to them sometimes. I got quiet with myself and I asked myself whether this was about justice or whether this was about pride or whether this was about fear. And what I kept coming back to was this: if I let this go, it would happen again. Not just to me, but to someone else, somewhere, someday. And more than that, I knew that if I folded, if I swallowed this and went quiet, I would be teaching everyone around me that I could be pushed past my limits without consequence. I would be teaching her that 90 years old meant pushover. And I was not willing to teach that lesson. I filed the police report. That was the first formal step. 2 officers came to my house, and I gave them my statement and I gave them the names of my witnesses. Several of my guests had already called me to say they were willing to make statements. My neighbor, the one who had known me for 30 years, was particularly firm about it. She said to me, "I watched this happen, and I am not going to pretend otherwise." My friend from church said the same. My son's cousin, who had driven in from out of town, offered a written statement that my lawyer later used. My son called me the evening after I filed the report. It was a hard conversation. He was not angry with me, exactly, but he was distressed, pulled in every direction at once. He said, "Mom, can we please just handle this in the family?" I said, "She slapped me in front of 10 people in my own home." He was quiet for a long time. I said, "I love you. That is not going to change. But this is not something I am able to walk away from." He said he understood. I do not know if he fully did, but he said it. She, on the other hand, was not quiet. Through the weeks that followed, as the legal process moved forward, she had plenty to say through her own lawyer, through messages relayed by my son, through a long letter she apparently wrote and then rewrote and eventually sent to me, making the case that I had provoked her, that she had been under stress, that her actions were out of character, that she had not intended to cause harm, that I was blowing things out of proportion. Her lawyer sent a letter suggesting we might resolve this informally, quietly, without going further. My lawyer responded on my behalf. We were going to court. The civil case moved faster than I expected. My lawyer was thorough and organized, and she had done this before. She gathered the witness statements. She gathered the documentation I had been keeping about the pattern of behavior over the years. She put together a picture of what had been happening in my home, to me for more than 2 years. She subpoenaed my son as a witness, which I knew would be painful for him. but which was necessary. He came and he told the truth. Whatever his feelings were about the situation, my son told the truth on the stand. Because that is who he is. Because that is who I raised him to be. The day I walked into that courtroom, I dressed carefully. I wore a blue dress that I have had for many years, the color of a clear sky, and I wore the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I walked slowly, because my knees require that of me now, but I walked in with my head up. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my lawyer beside me, and I looked at the room and I thought, I have been in harder places than this. I have sat in hospital rooms watching people I loved slip away. I have stood at gravesides in the rain. I have opened bills I did not know how I was going to pay and found a way to pay them. A courtroom does not scare me. She sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, and for the first time in 2 years she was not confident. She was not polished. She was smaller somehow. Sitting there in the formal stillness of that room, without the ability to redirect or reframe or charm her way out. The witnesses had said what they had said. The documents were what they were. The facts were the facts. I testified. I told the story from the beginning, from the first comments about downsizing to the final moment at the table when her hand came across my face. I spoke clearly and I spoke slowly, and I did not exaggerate, and I did not dramatize, and I did not cry, though there were moments when I could feel the tears wanting to come. I answered every question my lawyer asked, and I answered the questions her lawyer asked, and when her lawyer tried to suggest that I had been provoking the situation, that I had been difficult and uncooperative, I said, calmly, I am a 90-year-old woman who asked for a private conversation, to continue in private. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten anyone. I said please, and I was struck across the face in front of 9 witnesses. The judge was a woman, maybe in her 60s, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she listened to everything with the kind of attention that made you feel like she was keeping score of every word. When all the testimony was done, she looked at the room over those glasses and she spoke. She said that the evidence presented was clear and consistent across multiple, independent witnesses. She said that the defendant's behavior on that day constituted assault and battery. She said that the pattern of behavior documented over the preceding years, the persistent pressure regarding the plaintiff's property, the coercive nature of repeated unsolicited visits, the targeting of an elderly woman in her own home, these constituted a pattern of harassment that the court took seriously. She awarded damages, not just symbolic damages, actual, meaningful damages that acknowledge what had been done to me and what it had meant. I did not pump my fist. I did not celebrate. I sat at that table and I took a long breath, and I said thank you in my heart to every person who had sat at my dinner table that Sunday afternoon and told the truth about what they had seen. The aftermath was complicated, as it always is with family. My son and his wife, she is still his wife, went through a period of real difficulty. I do not know exactly what happened between them because that is their private life, and I am not entitled to all of it. What I know is that my son has called me every Sunday since. What I know is that he came to visit me about 2 months after the verdict and sat with me on the porch and held my hand and said, Mum, I am sorry I did not see it sooner. I said, you are here now. That was enough. That was more than enough. She has not contacted me. I do not expect her to. The court order is in place. The legal matter is concluded. What happens in her marriage, what she does with the knowledge of what she did, and the consequences it had, that is between her and God and her husband. As for me, I am still in my house. I am still in Charleston. The garden came back this spring better than it has in years, though I cannot take full credit for that because my neighbor has been helping me with the heavier work. The roses are blooming. The tomatoes are coming in. I sit on the porch in the evenings and I watch the fireflies. And some evenings I think about everything that has happened. And some evenings I just watch the fireflies and think about nothing at all. I am 90 years old. I have buried a husband and raised a son and worked 32 years and built a life out of very little, piece by piece, decision by decision, with my own hands and my own determination. Nobody is going to come into the home I built and tell me what it is worth, and when I should give it up, and whether I am worth defending. Nobody is going to lay a hand on me in my own living room and walk away without a reckoning. I want to say something to anyone who is watching this and who has an older person in their life, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a neighbor, someone who is older and maybe slower, and maybe not as strong as they used to be. Please look after them. Please pay attention. The people who would take advantage of the elderly are not always strangers. They are not always obviously villainous. Sometimes they are charming and well-dressed, and they come in through the front door and they sit at the dinner table and they smile. Pay attention to the patterns. Pay attention to the pressure. Pay attention when someone keeps coming back to the same topic in slightly different clothes. Listen to the older people in your life when they tell you something does not feel right, because they have usually been watching longer than you have, and they know more than you think they do. I was a nurse for 32 years. I know what it looks like when someone is being hurt slowly, quietly, in ways that are designed not to leave obvious marks. I recognized what was happening to me because I had seen it happen to other people, and I decided that knowing what I knew, I was not going to let it continue. If you are an older person watching this and something in this story sounds familiar, please know that you have rights. You have legal protections. You have recourse. Do not let anyone make you feel like your age means you have to accept things that no person of any age should have to accept. Find a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Talk to someone you trust. Keep records. Write things down. Your word matters. Your life matters. Your home is yours. And if someone raises their hand to you, in your own home in front of witnesses, know that there are courts that will listen. I am living proof of that. I am Rose. I am 90 years old. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I raised one good son. I grew a garden that has seen better years and worse years. I sat with sick people in their darkest hours and held their hands. And I took my daughter-in-law to court and I won. Do not let anyone tell you that at 90 years old, you are done fighting. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me where you are from down in the comments below. Drop your city. Drop your country. Let me know where in this world you are watching from tonight. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you think of your grandmother or your mother or someone else you love who has been through something hard, please give this video a like. It helps more people find it. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story. And please share this with your friends. Share it with your family. Share it with anyone who you think needs to hear it. There are a lot of us out here, older women who have been through things, who have kept quiet for too long, who have finally decided that quiet is not the same as peace. And sometimes the world needs to hear our stories. God bless you all. Take care of your grandmothers. Take care of each other. Goodbye.